afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome from New York City. Good evening and a good day to all of our global viewers, wherever they may be. On behalf of the Sustainable Investment Forum of North America and our wonderful hosts, Climate Action, the United Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative, and the Center for Accounting Research and Education at the University of Notre Dame, it is my privilege to welcome you to a panel titled Building Better Boards, Building Better and More Future-Focused Boards. And joining us on this panel, I am delighted to welcome an all-star cast, not only of folks who chair boards, but who have built boards, who have developed governance, and who have certainly been the role model for building a board of the future. Starting in alphabetical order, the way we're going to have today's session is I'm going to welcome the participants to join us, and then they will give us a brief introduction about themselves, because if I were to start introducing each and every one of my participants, I would spend the entire session telling you about their accomplishments. Right? They are preeminent leaders in their fields. So without further ado, I have Marco Antonio Achon. Marco is the head of investment banking for Santander in the US. And of course, Marco will, when I finish this round of introductions, he will then tell you about himself, what he feels about boards, and an opening statement. We have with us from Lisbon, Gabriela Figueiredo Diaz, who is the chair of the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants, but she has also chaired several other regulatory bodies prior to that. She was also the chair of the Portuguese Securities Commission, amongst several other appointments. And we have Robert Hertz. Bob currently serves on the boards of Morgan Stanley and Fannie Mae in terms of chairing the audit committees. And he was also the former chair of several other regulatory boards. He also serves on the boards of Workiva and our own board at Accountability. My name is Sunny Misser, and I'll be your moderator for this day. And I work with a company called Accountability. So without further ado, Marco, I'd like to welcome you. And if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and tell our viewers about some of your thoughts and positions when it comes to corporate governance and boards. And then, of course, we'll jump into the questions. Marco.
Thank you, Sunny. Pleasure to be here with my esteemed panelists and under your leadership, Sunny. And thank you for creating this space for dialogue and cooperation. I work for Santander. Santander is a world-leading financial institution. We have our purpose is to help people and business prosper, and our aim is to be the best open financial services platform. Allow me to focus on a key aspect with this opening statement, which is the involvement of women in boards. If we want to have more future-focused and more efficient boards, the academia and the evidence that we have on financial performance, employee retention, and overall performance of companies is that those that have more women representation are more efficient. Allow me to give you one quick example of how Santander is doing that internally and externally, helping our clients. Internally, we have one of the highest Bloomberg indexes in terms of women representation. And our aim is to have 30% of senior leadership represented by women in the next years. Also, we help our clients in a very specific way. We have an ESG solutions group that has been helping clients and is currently helping clients in this regard. And I would like to point out one specific situation. We helped the Republic of Chile in the last 2 weeks to raise circa $3 billion, both in dollars and in euros. And they were the first sovereign to add a KPI through the sustainability linked bond, which we helped Santander help them to structure, in which they want to have 40% of the board representation by women by 2025. And that's all the companies that are supervised by the Chilean Financial Commission. That's another example of how to get more efficient and future-focused boards. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. That creates a wonderful segue for one of the questions that we're going to share with the panelists. Marco, thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Gabriela Figueroa-Diaz. Gabriela, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the context of our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Sunny. I'd like to start by thanking you for this opportunity to participate in this panel and greet my esteemed panel colleagues. My name is Gabriela Figueroa-Diaz. I am currently the chair of the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants, the IESBA, which is a standard setter that, as the name says, sets ethics and independence standards for accountants, including auditors. Before that, I was previously the chair of the Portuguese Securities and Markets Commission, so regulator, and I had some positions at the ESMA board, which is the European supervisor of securities and markets, and also at IOSCO board, and I was vice chair of the Corporate Governance Committee at OECD. To mention just a few. I'm also the chair of the board of the Coimbra University, which is my pro bono activity, and probably the most difficult one, I must say. So besides that, I joined the IESBA last year in January, so 1.5 years ago. It's been a hectic time, mostly working on sustainability matters. In January last year, when I joined the IESBA, we were about to start working on our next strategy and work plan. And it was absolutely clear to me, given my background and everything that I had observed in the years ahead, that it was imperative for the IESBA to walk this space and develop some ethics and independence standards, specifically for sustainability-related information. That's what's been keeping us extremely busy, developing these standards with the awareness that it's a totally different area, totally different thing, with a different purpose and different difficulties as well. But also with the awareness that everything that we do well and with quality comes from the relationship, the intense outreach and dialogue that we are keeping with our stakeholders, be them accountants or non-accountants. That's what we have been doing. We have been developing these standards. They will be set out or issued by the end of the year for consultation, but we are aware and we are sure that after all the conversations and the open doors that we are keeping to our stakeholders, what we are going to propose already includes very diverse visions, needs, and concerns. So, just to start, this is it.
Thank you, Gabriela, for that very helpful introduction and great context, and importantly for the service that you have provided as a regulator, and you continue to do so. Next, we have Bob Hirsch, and Bob has served on both sides as a regulator as well as a global managing partner with Price Waterhouse. And of course, now he serves on several boards. Bob, if we could have you give us a little bit of context similar to the other panelists.
Sure, and thanks, Sunny, for inviting me to join this panel on a very important set of topics. I grew up in New Jersey till I was 14. Then we moved to Buenos Aires, Argentina. I went to an Anglo-Argentine school. The English part of the day was geared towards the English university system, and I went to University of Manchester. In Manchester, I met my good lady wife there. We got married. I started with Price Waterhouse back in 1974 as what they call an article clerk, and made my way through the ranks and transferred to the U.S. and eventually joined actually Coopers and Lybrand. And 20 years later, the two firms merged. I was an auditor for many years. I headed the corporate finance advisory services practice, and eventually became the senior technical partner of the firm, both Coopers and then the merged firm of PricewaterhouseCoopers, in charge of the accounting, auditing, SEC policy, risk management, practice quality. And that led me into the wonderful world of accounting standard setting, Sunny. And I was chosen as one of the original board members of the newly created at that time International Accounting Standards Board. And a couple of years after that, I was asked to become the chairman of the U.S. Financial Accounting Standards Board, which I did from 2002 to 2010. And since then, I've been doing kind of a variety of things. As you mentioned, a number of boards, advisory boards, very involved in various sustainability projects, activities. I was for many years on the board of directors of the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and I continue with that now with the International Sustainability Standards Board of the IFRS Foundation on two of their advisory committees and various other projects trying to leave the world a better place for all of us, and particularly my kids and grandkids.
Now that's inspiring words indeed, Bob, because once again, this is important service, and this is service that matters. So, what I would love to do is, encourage our participants to keep their answers as you have, concise and to the point, and then we will go back and forth of what each of you say. Now, for a very long time, corporate boards have been expected to set what they call the tone at the top. And along with the tone at the top, the directors serve a very important purpose. They are the vital link between the core values of the company and ultimately the business performance of the company. And how do you link the core values down to business performance? And there's a lot of discussion, ladies and gentlemen, that is about the board of tomorrow and the board of yesterday, and how the board of tomorrow will need to be very different. It is not just a matter of ticking boxes. It's a matter of changing perspectives. And a lot of discussion also centers that the topics that you folks are discussing on the boards that you serve are very different from the topics even 5 years ago. Discussions about ESG, discussions about inclusion and diversity, discussions around artificial intelligence, discussions about cyber risk. So there is a change that is happening. And my first question is to Bob, and this could be equally a question to any of you, but we'll start with Bob. As you sit on several boards and you see this transformation occurring in front of you, where do you see, as stakeholder expectations start to intensify, regulatory scrutiny seems to get stronger, what do boards and directors need to do to meet these evolving requirements of the future? Where is this heading? Over to you, Bob.
Yeah, sure. Wow, that's a multifaceted question. As you said, clearly the expectations of boards are higher and higher, not only for investors, but broader stakeholder group as well. And there's all sorts of issues coming, to the companies and therefore the board oversight that boards need to be up on and address. You name some of them, but just in recent years, the onset of the global pandemic, and how's it going to affect our business? How do we deal with it? The increasing move to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Cyber risk management in general, and the host of ESG issues that are of increasing focus. And so, Sonny, my view is that in order to be able to be as effective as we can, we not only need good processes, but we need an increasingly diverse board. Not only in terms of gender and race, and that those are very important, but I think the overriding thing for me is to have a diversity of people on a board that have different backgrounds, expertise in different areas, different experiences, both in their careers and in life overall. I found that that really enriches the board discussion. People, or not from my background, will raise points. And I say, boy, I never thought of that. Boy, that's a really a good point. And so in order to do that, I think in recent years, there's been a move to try to create that tapestry of different expertise, skills, experiences. And I think usually the nominating governance committee is charged with, keeping a pipeline of potential board members. To do that, what I've seen is that boards create like a skills and experience matrix where you kind of try to make sure that you're covering in terms of the experiences, backgrounds, the range of different areas that boards are required to get involved with and provide oversight over, and might be risk management, leadership, public policy, IT and cyber, now ESG, and of course, most recently, artificial intelligence. And so you maintain this thing, when people are scheduled to come off of boards, and you know how to maintain this kind of overall tapestry of experience. And you will see, Sonny, that many companies now in their annual proxy statement here in the U.S. will publish that kind of matrix and show for each board member which kind of experiences and backgrounds and skills they contain. I think the other thing is that, Sonny, you and I, we grew up in a profession environment. Being a professional means you've got to keep up to date. And so board training, whether it's in-house or going to the many outside venues that are available, is very important. I think also board refreshment is important. I think also that it's important that probably annually the boards and the individual committees sit back and evaluate their performance. What could they do differently, better? Get management input on that, and the like. So, yeah, I treat as I said, kind of being a board member now as kind of a profession.
Yeah,
And
it is.
you've got to be up to date and competent in it and focused.
You hit a very key message here, Bob, because when you talked about experience, and we have served on the professional services side of the equation. Um, in fact, accountability works very closely with boards of large companies, and we have developed a methodology that actually touches on all four of the aspects you mentioned. We call it the DIRE, DIRE assessment of boards, which is diversity, independence, refreshment, and expertise. Diversity, independence, refreshment, and expertise. And there is the board effectiveness review that you mentioned, Bob, because one of the key things that we tend to focus, at least in the Western Hemisphere, is we view boards through a fairly narrow dimensional lens, where we look at gender, we look at race, and then we look at lifestyle choices. But when you look beyond that, such as experiences, backgrounds, age, disabilities, right? Nobody talks about that. People coming from fundamentally different socioeconomic backgrounds and how that contributes to a fundamental difference in thinking, as opposed to just a diversity of pigmentation. These are all very, very important components that will lead to not just a different structure, but perhaps a different outcome. Certainly would like to invite Gabriela and Marco if you have any comments or perspectives on our question regarding boards.
I would love to. I would love to answer and add briefly that there's no single good governance body for boards, because it all varies. But what is clear, good governance is every single step taken to increase the trust, transparency, and accountability towards shareholders and stakeholders. So in that lifelong learning journey that Bob was alluding to, every single step that is geared towards increasing the trust, transparency, and accountability to our shareholders and stakeholders is a really good step.
That's an excellent point, Gabriela. Anything you would like to share with us?
Sure, of course. Building a little bit upon what my esteemed colleagues have already said, there are a few issues or topics that have to be taken into consideration to build a better board and a future-proof board. And this is about diversity. This is about looking for different backgrounds. This is about changing the corporate governance approach, all those things. But we also have to have in mind that these developments also bring challenges because we have more diverse people around the table. So it's probably more difficult to make agreements, to reach common visions, etc. And for me, what is the element that will provide consistency and open the door for strong, long-lasting decisions is ethics. Yeah, and good governance, of course. This is the only common language to everybody, be them engineers or lawyers, be them older or younger, be them from a minority group or not. Ethics is actually stateless, raceless, timeless, and it's what provides the glue between the very diverse components of a board and of the corporate governance structure of a company.
Now, you make a wonderful point, and this is actually going to be the segue into my third question, but I need to finish my second one before I get to the third question about ethics. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. The second question, as we move from boards, and this is something we have spent a lot of time thinking about, we've spent a lot of time researching, and in fact, we have an entire group which publishes something called the 7 Sustainability Trends as part of accountability. And everyone around the world, of course, is talking about ESG. But we strongly believe that there is a new G in ESG. Corporate governance is not going away. it is here to stay. It's going to get better. But I think there is a different G, a new G, and a big G in ESG. And that G is geopolitics. If we look around the world and the world we're living in, the impact of geopolitics on every aspect of not just society and economies, but also business, right? And without going into any specific examples, a certain unrest in a part of Europe uh, has caused significant ripple effects. And I can go down the list: disruption of supply chains, increased cost of money or capital, access to energy, price of energy, okay, inflation, unemployment, mass migrations of large sums and numbers of people, which can displace the local equilibriums of smaller countries. Okay, and of course, a very inconsistent monetary policy when you look and compare from country to country. Right now, all of this can, is, and continues to be impacted by geopolitics. And my next question, of course, starting with one of our panelists and open to all panelists, Marco, you work for a very large global organization, a financial services organization. And clearly, you must be seeing and feeling the impact in the business that you do of investment banking. Okay? How and do you, first of all, agree about the impact of geopolitics on our businesses, on our economies, and on our society? And if so, what are your thoughts and observations on this big new G of ESG?
Thank you, Sunny. A critical point and a fantastic question. Building on your introduction, the fact is that we are living through a pivotal moment in our lives that is reshaping the world as we know it. The global business landscape is being totally disrupted, and we are need to be dealing with uncertainty in almost every sphere of our lives. The reality is that we are in this situation, and geopolitics is, I call it a magnificent, has to be a magnificent obsession, magnificent and healthy obsession of the boards. And I say magnificent because of the real importance of it, and healthy because it has to be carried out in a very healthy and constructive manner. Now, there are multiple frameworks to go around it, but it has to be an imperative for the boards to have geopolitics at the front and center of their agendas. There's a very good system to approach it to a trifocal lens, short, medium, and long term, and also have a proper protocol to incorporate and a certain framework that has to be discussed at the board level. Allow me to give a bit of a very specific example of what we're seeing in at Santander. At Santander, we're seeing that Latin American countries are benefiting immensely for this near-shoring, friend-shoring dynamics. And basically, the key beneficiary of this has been Mexico. Mexico has phenomenal demographics, low manufacturing cost, expertise, and proximity and vicinity and trade agreements with the US and Canada. And that's just an example of a very powerful dynamic that is positively affecting Mexico. With that,
Thank you,
I will
Marco.
open to other comments from my colleagues.
Gabriella, Bob, any thoughts, any suggestions on the geopolitical aspects? Because it is very interesting. You know, I often start my conversations with you when I am not on this panel, when we meet professionally and socially, as to what part of the world are you in today, right? Because I don't want to, impact you by calling you late at night. And all of you are wonderful and gracious, and you still are as cheerful as ever when we speak on the phone. But this is the global reality. We are all connecting with each other from very different parts of a very hectic schedule internationally. And I'd be very curious to see what Bob and Gabriella have, if any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of an immediate thought is that it's good to have on boards people that with international experience, not just traveling for business, but that actually have lived and understand different cultures, ways of doing business, and the like. Particularly if it's a board of an international company. I also think that Marco's points are very, very well taken. That in terms of the strategy of a firm, and you look at different markets, and I'll use China as kind of the example. It's kind of the dilemma of China. You cannot not be there because it's such a big market, but on the other hand, the uncertainties and potential intrusions and the like, are also things you got to really plan for and around and the like. For example, cyber attacks, protecting your intellectual property, and contingency plans. And I just use China, but there's lots of other examples of that kind of thing as you move into and do significant business in different places.
Gabriella, any perspectives from a geopolitical standpoint?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. First thing, you started by mentioning, Sunny, that this is the new G. And I think that this shows that the ESG is starting to be short for everything that we want to put in this bag. That's why we as YESBA, we decided to abandon that ESG and speak about sustainability, because it's wider, because it's more flexible, because it allows us to progress and develop as things go. Secondly, and I'm speaking now as the chair of the YESBA. Geopolitics is important for us, and we are always observing what's happening around. But this is the beauty of being a global board, setting ethics standards for all the countries, all the jurisdictions, all the systems, etc. Is that we can somehow mitigate or help mitigate the shocks and the gaps between countries, jurisdictions, practices by means of these international global standards. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't understand and that we don't know that global ethics standards and a global board cannot overcome all the obstacles and all the problems. On the contrary, while this is the beauty of what we do or we try to provide and deliver, this is also our main obstacle or difficulty, is to calibrate different cultures, political approaches, regulations, etc., and try to deliver something which nevertheless may fit into any system, any specific circumstance. But what I can tell you is that global standards, if they are really robust, if they are really provided with this purpose of serving everybody, they are resilient to some specific happenings here and there. And I'm not going to name it. But again, we are not indifferent to these movements. And for instance, earlier this year or last year, I don't remember anymore, we issued a statement reminding accountants about their duties, namely in face of the Ukraine-Russia war. So we are not blind, we are not deaf, we are not insensitive to what's happening. We have a radar, a permanent radar. But the conclusion that I take is that having a global board with members from all over, from different countries, and working to deliver global ethics standards can be actually an useful instrument to overcome some of the problems that arise from geopolitical challenges.
That's very helpful perspective. Thank you, Gabriella. And Bob.
Yeah, this listening to Gabriella, clearly you have to understand the different cultures and ways of doing business, but I also think that across an international company, it's important to try to work to have a common culture and shared values across that. And also, mobility of people from one place to another in the business, I think is really important as well, that to help kind of seed and propagate that common culture.
This is absolutely critical, Bob, because regardless of the size of the organization, we have found an immediate and a lasting benefit to some of our staff travel to our different offices around the world. Because the next time they pick up the phone or call a Zoom, there is a shared history of having had a cup of coffee together, having had dinner together, met with each other, sat with each other, talked about each other's pets, whatever the case may be. And then they find out that there is more that they have in common than they have in differences, right? So it is, aside from food being one of the best weapons to make peace with, we have also found, as you stated, mobility and shared values as a critical point. This brings us beautifully to the third question, Gabriella, that I was talking about, the question of ethics. And this could be a session in itself, right? Now, every year, there are several ethical studies and surveys that are published. And the one that I have noticed over the last several years is something called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And it's in its, I think, 22nd or 23rd year. And they have about 28 to 30 countries that participate with over 30,000 respondents, right? And there's been an interesting shift, but more importantly, an interesting takeaway from these surveys. 50% of those people who answered the survey do not trust governments. 50%. 50% of those very same people did not trust the media. Now, I'm giving you this year's survey. Prior year surveys were slightly different. But a very interesting part has come out. While there is an erosion of trust on behalf of governments and that of media, there is a rising of trust quotient when it comes to businesses. And businesses scored an all-time high in the 2022 survey of 62%. So 62% of people would rather trust business from an ethical, from an oversight, and from getting the job done and doing the right job. Now, first and foremost, this is very reassuring for those of us in the business community. But more importantly, ethics are not simple to administer, to supervise, to oversee, and occasionally to comply with. And I think in one of our earlier discussions, Gabriella and I were joking around, and we were joking about, do we have 10 commandments or do we have 10 suggestions? And she stopped me there. And she said, Sonny, ethics are not the same as morals. They're completely different. And Gabriella, you would have a lot to speak about this, but when you look at not just your organization, but your entire ecosystem around you, and you're developing a very important ethical standard that is due for release in the near future, what do you see both as the role, more importantly, the condition of ethics in the business environment and in the business world as a whole?
Thank you for that question, Sunny, and please interrupt me if I'm speaking for too long, because it's really a very inspiring issue, topic, and question. Let me just start by giving you some background about where my vision comes from. I can't forget my years as a markets regulator. In many positions, in many areas, I started being a director, international area, issuers, financial information, well, these things. And what I saw over the last 15 years or something was a significant number of bad things happening within the financial crisis, but a specific crisis in Portugal, my country, and etc. And I had the opportunity to see in practice these things happening, that investors were getting away from the market because they did not trust, and I'm going to list, they did not trust the companies, but they did not trust the governments as well, taking care of the countries, of the companies, and sometimes they did not trust the regulators themselves. So where I come from is from a place where we were seeing a clear lack of trusts because of things happening in the markets and in the economies and in companies, etc. But most of the times, because these things were created by bad behaviors of people within these organizations. So that's the perspective and the vision that I come from, and that I have as a background when I work on ethics standards. Ethics is for me, and this is like an obsession, if I may, but I think it's for me what the most important topic to deal with the challenges that boards and companies are dealing nowadays. I'm happy that you are telling me that trust, according to the Edelman barometer, people trust, citizens trust companies more than governments and media. I'd like to leave the question, well, why? I think it's an important question, and it can be that some of this result is also in comparison of how they not trust governments and media. But I think that actually something is being done, and something is being done over the last years by the companies to restore the trust of their stakeholders, not only the shareholders, in these companies. First, they understood, and I heard both Bob and Marco mentioning this along their comments, that not only shareholders matter, but also the stakeholders in general. It is important to provide the community with a sense of value, a sense of delivering something that somehow directly or indirectly works for everybody, that companies are actually starting to embed and to incorporate in their action. Not everywhere in the same way, with the same pace, with the same adherence, but it's happening, and it's becoming something which is common to companies' approach to corporate governance, boards, etc. Secondly, the scrutiny from these stakeholders, let's call them like that, investors, users, consumers, etc., the scrutiny under which they have been putting the companies, and the ethics and behaviors and conduct in companies also triggered, to my view, the raise of higher ethical conducts within the companies. Thirdly, and more important, the sustainability, not ESG in strict sense, but sustainability approach, the long-term approach to management, to company strategies, etc. I think it's helping a lot in that respect. Because the idea that companies cannot be governed, managed, planned to be successful today or tomorrow, but that they have to be sustainable in the sense that they will be providing value to the shareholders, to stakeholders, etc. over time, is something that the community values. There is a book that I'd like to raise your attention to from a famous professor, English professor, called Colin Meyer, named Prosperity. And it's fascinating how he shows that this care, this concern of managing according to ethics, according to long-lasting results and values, etc., creates value for the company itself. So I think it's about changing behaviors, and what's happening, I think, it's that behaviors are actually changing under two pressures: the pressure from regulators, at least in some parts of the world, where regulators are acting over the conduct of directors, etc., and mostly under the pressure of stakeholders, I mean investors, users, etc. Standards, of course, and namely ethics standards, play a role, an extremely important role here. Because again, and I understand that I responded too early to this question, but it's the only way to make sure that there is a common language, a common culture, as Bob was saying, common values that are observed and abide by all over, everywhere, irrespective of the very specific cultures or cultural approach and practices and etc. So this is, for me, the biggest, the most important value that we could provide as a global standard setter is that what we deliver works both to enhance trust of stakeholders, because it goes into the heart of what concerns stakeholders, which is the behavior. It's not the technical thing, it's not the numbers themselves, it's how people within the firms, within the companies behave. And these standards go directly into the heart of this problem, and they go into the heart of the problem by means of global, international, generally acceptable standards. And that's why they are already accepted and adopted by 130 countries all over, but we are reaching for more.
Gabrielle, this is a very multifaceted answer that you've given us, and I'm going to pick a couple of very key points that you have made about changing behaviors, right? But more importantly, you've always asserted, whether it's on this panel or outside, that it pays to follow an ethical code. It pays, not literally money, but it rewards you back, because the cost of not doing so is significantly worse and larger. Okay. You also, people often talk about common cultures and common values, but you talked about ethics as terms of being a shared language. Okay, that's interesting. And when you talk about language, I think regulators play an important part in determining what languages, quote unquote, language is acceptable, are acceptable, and what are not. Which brings me on this very same question to Bob. Bob is one of the principal authors of a groundbreaking report, a study from COSO, the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations for the Treadway Commission. And this is a guidance that has just been published that is giving you a great amount of clarity of internal controls over what do you report in sustainability. So the content and the clarity and the accuracy and the consistency of the information that you will then use, which is a part of the language that Gabriella talked about. Bob, would you very briefly give us a very quick perspective on this, and what can we expect, and what do businesses need to do with this wonderful report of yours?
Yeah, so I don't know, how many people in the audience are even familiar with COSO, but it was founded as a voluntary effort back in the mid '80s to look at fraudulent reporting and try to, mitigate that. And it was founded by 5 leading organizations: the American Accounting Association, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the Financial Executives International, the Institute of Internal Auditors, the Institute of Management Accountants. And they came up with a lot of recommendations, and one was the need for better controls over financial reporting. In 1992, they issued what was called their internal control integrated framework for implementing good, effective controls over financial reporting. In the U.S., the Sarbanes-Oxley Act about 10 years later made that kind of mandatory reporting by companies to talk about, whether they had effective internal controls or financial reporting, and for most companies to have their auditors look at that and attest to it. And it's used very broadly around the world now as well. Well, in 2013 study, COSO updated that framework, and very importantly, they observed that it could be used not just for financial reporting, but other types of reporting, regulatory reporting, internal management reporting, and also the growing realm of now what we call ESG or sustainability reporting. And so in 2016, I and two co-authors took it upon ourselves to do a study at that time and to what extent companies were beginning to implement internal controls over sustainability reporting. And we kind of had a mixed bag. So I think there were leading companies, particularly in Europe, that were well ahead in doing that. But in the U.S., most companies were not yet even embarked on that journey. Well, we fast forward to about a year ago, with all the focus in boardrooms and C-suites on sustainability and sustainability strategy, risk management. COSO commissioned us to go back and we had a few other co-authors and expand upon that 2016 work and update it. As you said, we came out in March with a guide on that, on achieving effective control over sustainability reporting using the COSO framework. And it uses the COSO whole structure of 5 components, which are the control environment. And getting back to Gabriella's points in your question, the number one principle and the starting point is a commitment to integrity and ethical values, and tone at the top. So there's the control environment, there's a risk assessment, control activities, how to implement them, information and communication, both internally and externally, and then monitoring and feedback loop into all of that. And the guide we published goes through all of those components and what are called the 17 principles underneath them. And underneath them are 87 specific points of focus that get into implementing it. And we talk about, what's going on in different companies and what are best practices, where resources are, and the like. And it seems to have gotten a very good reception in the marketplace, and a fair amount of traction. Just guessing by the number of speaking, writing, interview opportunities I and the other authors have gotten in the last few months.
That's absolutely true, Bob. And that's a really helpful and a thorough overview of the report. And we will certainly be sharing it amongst our participants. It's interesting. I'm also very mindful about time, but no discussion about ethics would be complete without a head of investment banking commenting on what he or she feels is an ethical dilemma, an ethical consideration, and the final word on ethics. And for no other reason, Marco, than just the flow of panelists, you will have the final word on ethiks, and would be very interesting because of where you sit. And then we're going to go to a rapid fire round.
Thank you, Sunny, and thank you, Sunny. I wholeheartedly agree with what Gabriela and Bob mentioned. Allow me to complement the culture is what defines an institution, and strong, ethical, and solidly rooted culture is critical. Principles like honesty, fairness, diligence, and care are essential for the prosperity and growth of a company, prosperity of growth of a society, and ultimately that benefits the capital markets, the trust that investors place in that company or in that issuer, and ultimately it benefits society. So it's a critical element of any institution.
Thank you so much, Marco, and that's a fitting sort of transition to wrap this question up. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost at the 5-minute mark, but the 5 minutes wouldn't be complete just with your closing statements. So, as you're probably aware, some of you who have participated with us in the past, we have a rapid fire round. And it's a very simple question. It has nothing to do with ethics, geopolitics, or boards, I promise you. And you don't have time to think about your answer. You just answer it because this is an answer that you have shared with yourself for the last many decades. And for no other particular order, I'm going to start with someone who I've known for very long, Bob Hurst. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have a couple of extra seconds, Marco and Gabriella, to think about this. But I'm going to ask you a question that says, I know all of you are lovers of arts and music. So if you were to name just one single song, you can't have more than one song. Doesn't depend on the mood and the timing, but just one single song of all time in your entire life that you would consider the most important, or perhaps your favorite song. Bob, which one would it be? And you can tell us why as well. We would love to hear that. Our viewers would.
Wow. Well, I guess if I had to choose one, probably influenced by where I am. And right now I'm in Long Branch, New Jersey, near the beach. And a few blocks from here is where Bruce Springsteen in the 1970s lived, at a little house, and where he wrote his first hit, Born to Run. And I'm still, every time I hear that song, I get up. It's just, I remember the first time I heard it, it just knocked me out. It's just an unbelievably energetic song.
Anyone who knows you, Bob, would say that embodies you because you are certainly born to run. You don't stop. My friend Marco, what would be your favorite song
So,
of all time?
very difficult question, but I would go with Viva la Vida by Coldplay. I cannot find a more fitting and positive and constructive tone with the name of that song and the rhythm. And if you haven't gone and seen them live, you're missing big, because my wife and I went with friends last year. They are exceptional, and they're very, very sustainability conscious. They did take special care, effort into making sure that all the waste, all the energy, a whole multifaceted host of topics of their concert and their tour was done. So, Viva la Vida by Coldplay. I would go with that.
That certainly provides a lot of context, Marco. Thank you for sharing. And Gabriella, what would your favorite song of all time be?
Well, this is the most difficult question in this panel because I am never ever able to identify my favorite, whatever it may be. So I'll go for a song which I like. I don't know if it's my favorite. Name my favorite song from Elton John.
Thank you so much.
No
Because
special reasons.
no special reasons. I was waiting for the qualifier, but it is also one of the songs I like. So, and before all three of you asked me for my favorite song, it's Ave Maria. It was a Schubert symphony of Opus 52, composed on the basis of Sir Walter Scott's poem. And I think it gets me out of trouble, especially when I say it 3 times. translated into Hail Mary. Without further delay, I would request all of our participants. Well, first of all, I can summarize this, but I mean, what is there to summarize? You guys have had nuggets from start to finish, right? When we talked about boards, we talked about experiences, we talked about lifelong learning, we talked about training, we talked about diversity, we talked about independence, refreshment, and of course, expertise. And you constantly refer to the fact that boards need to evolve, they need to change, and they need to reflect the realities. When you talked about global business environment, you talked about the uncertainty when it came to geopolitics. But I think there was also another key point that you made is rather than putting everything under ESG, let's refer to as a broader term, sustainability. We talked about the resilience necessary at the global level to manage geopolitics, the importance of a common culture and shared values and mobility. I think that was your point, Bob. When it came to ethics, this could be another session in itself. But we talked about how important behaviors were to ethics. And it's not just about having a code of ethics that is codified and documented, but it is about living them. The clarity between ethics and morals, and of course, that in the long term, and perhaps in the short and medium term, ethics always pay when you look at the alternatives, right? And then, of course, we talked about your very first principle at COSO, Bob, about a commitment to integrity and ethical values, all of it enveloped with culture. Definitely on behalf of all our organizers, but more importantly, on a personal basis, I would like to thank the three of you because it has been absolutely, absolutely enriching, fulfilling, and you have taken this discussion to the next level. Clearly, this needs to be continued, and hopefully it will. But may I just request you, each of you, in any particular order, and I'll start with Gabriella, to just give us, 60 seconds of perspective as your closing comments. Gabriella.
Well, my closing comments is that if companies want to be future-proof, they have to set up future-proof boards and future-proof strategies. And they will be only future-proof and ensure sustainability, the sustainability of the companies if they are focused on establishing, setting, and putting in practice the strongest ethics culture within the company, make it drill down in the company, and make sure that it comes from the top and is learned and embedded throughout the company. This is the only way to be future-proof.
Thank you, Gabriella. Marco, your closing comments, sir.
Thank you, Sunny. I define myself as an impatient optimist, and I think, and I am quite quite an optimist, despite all the challenges that we have in today's world and the disruption that we're going through. I'm an optimist. I believe that we've never been with such a powerful set of tools, but that has to impel us to take action, and we need to make sure that the sense of urgency propels us to take action every day, every email, every interaction with client, with colleagues, so that we make this a reality, and we are contributing with our example and setting the correct example in our boards and in our interactions with business and in society in general.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you. And Bob, your comments in closing.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding a little bit like an accounting nerd, we have a saying in accounting that what you measure and report matters. And so I think the corollary of that is, well, we should be measuring and reporting on those things that matter. And figuring that out is very, very crucial, I think, to management, to board oversight and the like. It affects behaviors, actions, and ultimately the outcomes.
Thank you, Bob. That's most helpful. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for your time, because I know literally that several of you are jumping on to a board meeting as you jump out of this discussion onto building better boards. We appreciate the viewership and the readers across from a variety of stakeholders, ranging from academia to business to investors to regulators and others. Appreciate this commentary, which is of course very valuable, and we would like to thank you for your time and participation and your contributions, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in the future. So thank you very much, and hope you go humming your favorite song as we get off this channel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.